This following section will explore what you do once you get your results back for how you analyze and interpret your data. Ideally, you will have access to a database which will do the scoring for you. Depending on your affiliation, some data entry options you may have include the Protective Factors database, which is available on the Friends website, CAPIT Access Database, Field Nursing Access Database, Persimmon, Apricot, or the CIBHS spreadsheet. In case you are hand scoring, instructions are provided here. The first important thing to note is that certain items will need to be reverse scored so that all high scores indicate the presence of greater protective factors. So what's meant by this is that in some items, a 7 might be a good thing if that meant that you strongly agree that you have someone to call in the case of a crisis. But in another case, a 7 may be not such a good thing because you're strongly agreeing that you don't know where to go for help if you have trouble making ends meet. So to reverse the scores, what you would do is look at the number circled and then subtract it from 8 to get your new reverse score. For each protective factor subscale, you would then sum the scores and divide by the number of items answered in order to get your average score. The only exception to this are the items related to knowledge of parenting and child development, and that is because the test developers say that those items are distinct and are not meant to be rolled up into one subscale. And so they suggest that you report on means, standard deviations, and percentages of those instead. This table provides you with information on the item numbers that correspond with each protective factor subscale and the minimum number of items that need to be answered in each of these subscales in order for you to actually compute your subscale score. So for example, in family functioning resiliency, there are 5 items. However, participants need to answer at least 4 of these items in order for you to compute a valid subscale. So now that you have your data, what can it tell you? In general, pre-test data is useful in that it provides you with an overall snapshot of the families you serve and helps you assess the needs of your clients at the beginning of services. Post-test data is useful in that you can assess progress towards targets or benchmarks you set, assess progress over time of different groups or subgroups, and you can also use it to plan and identify areas for program improvement. This slide gives an example of how a program might use benchmarking. In this example, the program was looking at the average scores of participants on a 7-point scale, and they decided that they wanted to strive to have all of the protective factors reach a level of 6 on average. So looking at this, you can see that the areas of family functioning and concrete support have the most room for growth in meeting this target. And this can help them in planning how they might strengthen services they provide in those areas to try to strive to achieve their goal. In the second example, the bars represent the percentage of participants who showed improvement pre-post. And this program decided that they wanted to see in each of the protective factor areas listed at least 50% of parents showing improvement pre-post. And so in this area, again, you see that concrete support was an area in which not as many parents showed improvement pre-post as the other protective factor areas. Your Year 1 data will assist you in setting benchmarks such as these. You'll be able to see what your baseline is, where your strengths are, and where your areas of need are. Try to use data from outside sources, established benchmarks. Perhaps there's a model program that you're modeling yourself after, or there's state or national level standards that you can use to inform your benchmark setting process. Prior to setting any benchmarks, be sure to go back to your pre-test data and assess if the benchmarks that you set are feasible in the time frame that you have laid out. Conducting statistical tests can help you to understand your data in more depth. So for example, let's say pre-post you see a positive change in the degree of protective factors that your clients seem to possess. But how do you know if that change was significant or whether it was just due to chance? Conducting a t-test can help you feel more confident in your results if you see that it was a statistically significant change. In addition, more advanced tests, such as ANCOVAs, can help you to answer questions such as, are there certain groups of people within my clients that seem to be benefiting from certain services more than others? In conducting statistical tests, some important things to keep in mind are to always make sure you have an adequate sample size for any tests that you want to conduct, and to ground your research questions and hypotheses in your logic model. So there should be research or a rationale behind the questions that you want to ask of your data. And look for resources such as online statistical calculators that can help you with these analyses, or if you have access to a statistical consultant, then perhaps they can help you look at your data in these ways. And always don't forget to keep in mind whether or not your findings are practically significant for your work, even if they're statistically significant. So is the magnitude of change of practical significance to your work? Some results will be made available from First 5 Sonoma County and upstream investments in January 2016 related to protective factor survey data collected over the past year. These analyses will look at questions such as, what are the community-wide trends in parents' protective factors? What are the associations between risk factors and protective factors? What services or combinations of services in the community seem to be associated with the greatest gains in particular protective factors? And we will also be providing agency-level data pre-post back to the agencies themselves, but this data will only be released to those individual agencies.